And firstly, I want to welcome each and every one of you for taking the time to attend this webinar. A lot of effort and work has gone into it, and thank you to all of those involved, but especially to you as the attendees of this webinar. So this webinar today, we are going to be focusing on love, relationships, and disability. The right to belong, connect, and be included. For those of you who don't know, I am Chadley, and I'm the QASA project coordinator, and it's an honor for me to host this important webinar today. So in today's theme, it touches us deeply. We all have the desire to love, to be loved, to experience connection, and to feel a sense of belonging as well. But for many persons with disabilities, the journey towards relationships and intimacy is often shaped by stigma, social barriers, misconceptions, and the emotional labor of having to navigate a world that has still a limited understanding of disability. And when we speak about disability rights, our focus should not only be about having access to healthcare, having access to universally accessible transport, career opportunities. We also have to talk about the right to personal autonomy, the right to express oneself, and the right to form and sustain meaningful relationships without discrimination or judgment. Love and connection are not extras in life. They are central to our well-being, our identity, and our dignity. That is why today's conversation is so important, because we'll be diving into very real experiences that many persons with disabilities face when dating. And we've got two wonderful guest speakers that will share more insights on their knowledge and experience regarding relationships, connections, and sexuality. And we trust that today will be an enriching experience for all of us. After the two speakers do their presentations, we will have about a 15 to 20-minute Q&A panel opportunity where you can ask questions to the panel. And thereafter, we will have a conclusion. So, without further ado, as we celebrate the month of love, and recently we celebrated Valentine's Day, I want to introduce you to Thembelihle Ngcai, who has recently been given the opportunity to be a QASA Community Partner, but she is also an accomplished international essayist, where she's written 3 important pieces on dating and relationships. And she will be sharing her personal experiences regarding dating and relationships and give us a clearer insight of the dating world according to the experiences of a person with disability from her perspective. So, without further ado, let's hand over to the beautiful, intelligent, creative, and open-minded individual, Thembelihle Ngcai.
Chadley, I really appreciate that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are well. My name, as introduced by Chadley, is Thembelihle Ngcai, and I'll be making a short presentation today. I have a physical disability myself by way of a rare genetic disease. It's a progressive muscle disease called spinal muscular atrophy. And it means that my muscles since birth have been almost dying, wasting away, as doctors would say. And that over time, I've started to use an assistive device, and it affects my entire body, but most prominently my upper and lower limbs. So I'm going to flag my presentation. Please, could you indicate when you can see it on the screen? Thank you. It should be visible. I'll just put it in presentation mode. Charlie, do you mind indicating for me if you can see it on your side?
Hi, Thembi. Yes, we can see it on our side. We just had a query there that your voice is buffering a little bit. So I think if we can all just turn off our cameras so that we can just assist with the bandwidth there. If you don't
Okay.
mind.
I think what I'll do as well on my side, I'll just shut down applications that may just be weakening my network. Am I better now, audibility wise?
Yes, on my side, you are the Thembelihle.
Okay. So thank you once again for this opportunity to QASA to present today on dating while disabled or dating with a disability in how I view and relate to the topic that we have today. Before we begin, I do want to say this up front, and it's a spoiler alert, and it's that I am still single. And not because I haven't been wanted, not because I have not dated, not because I have not done the work. And I have to say that I am still single because my presentation is not about a success story. It's a conversation about what happens in dating and what we don't always have the language for, especially when disability is involved. Some of it may sound familiar to you all, some of it may feel uncomfortable, and I think that's okay because that's usually where the work sits. So I want to start off, I think, with something familiar, not dramatic, not traumatic, just familiar. You meet someone, there's interest, chemistry, is the messages are thoughtful, the connection feels real, and then you notice something small. You always meeting late, always indoors, always just the two of you. No one explicitly ever says, I'm hiding you. Nothing is explicitly wrong. But slowly you realize you exist in a very particular time of day. That's not a story about disability. That is a story about how desire behaves when it is unsure of itself. I want to ground this presentation in something simple. Persons with disabilities don't date for different reasons. We are not chasing something abstract or symbolic. We want attraction. We want chemistry. We want the timing to line up. We want compatibility. So the basics still apply. What changes isn't the desire. It's how easily that desire is allowed to move forward. How much friction it meets, how much explaining it requires, and how often it has to justify itself. Most people think of themselves as not being discriminatory in dating. They think of themselves as being cautious or realistic or quote unquote just being honest. But dating is full of small decisions we don't interrogate. Who we introduce, who we hesitate with, who we like privately but struggle to imagine publicly. Persons with disabilities or disabled bodies tend to surface those hesitations more clearly, not because they are heavier, but because they ask something of the future. One of the hardest things about dating like this is that nothing ever explodes. It just erodes. You don't spiral, you adjust. You stop asking direct questions. You stop imagining far ahead. You start managing your expectations quietly. And that's how insecurity shows up. Not as self-hatred, but as self-editing. Persons with disabilities are desexualized. We are seen as innocent, fragile. We are seen, but not like that. We are often described as strong, inspiring, resilient. All of this sounds like praise until you realize what's missing: desire. Our bodies are often read through care, protection, through survival, not through longing, not through attraction, not even through affection. So when a person with a disability wants romance or expects it to be mutual, it can feel unexpected, not wrong, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity has a way of creating distance. Some people are very comfortable wanting you as a person with a disability, as long as that wanting stays contained. They're curious, engaged, intense, but there's a ceiling. The connection doesn't quite expand. It doesn't deepen into a commitment. It doesn't move into a shared space. It just hovers. And if you've been on either side of that, you know how disorientating it is. Persons with disabilities, I know I have throughout the time that I've dated, we often learn to make dating easier for everyone else. We explain early, we soften things, we preempt discomfort. But here's the part that really gets named. When one person keeps managing the emotional environment, the intimacy does not grow. It just stabilizes. And stability without reciprocation eventually feels very lonely. I have been described as being very guarded, closed off, cold, unfriendly, and many a times just scary. But all of us, I think, have been described in one of those ways. Some might say you are, closed off, you are careful, you are hard to read. But guardedness, when you have a disability and when you enter a romantic space, it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from being misread, from being half chosen, from being open and then quietly left holding the weight of that openness. From the outside looking in, it can look like distance. From the inside, it feels like your memory doing its job. There's this very popular narrative, and it's come up times. It's really well-meaning advice a lot of us, if not all of us, have received, which is that if you truly love yourself, you shouldn't want anyone else. That independence should cancel longing. But self-knowledge doesn't replace touch, and confidence doesn't erase the desire to be chosen. Wanting love is not a failure of self-worth. It's not an insecurity. It's just human. Meaningful relationships don't start with certainty. They start with staying present when something becomes slightly inconvenient. When it asks for imagination, when it asks for honesty, when it asks you to be seen choosing. What helps is not grand gestures, it's letting a relationship take up space publicly, slowly, imperfectly. If you are dating someone who has a disability, you don't need to have all of the answers. You don't need to be fearless or perfectly informed. What matters is attentiveness to where you hesitate, to what you avoid naming, to what feels easier to keep private than to claim, because discomfort isn't failure, but silence is. As persons with disabilities, we are not asking for a different love. We are asking for the kind of love that does not retreat the moment it becomes visible, the kind that doesn't need to be simplified or hidden to survive. And if any of this felt familiar, maybe you don't have a disability, it's not because you're a bad person, but I think the moral that I'm trying to bring across here is that intimacy is where society's unfinished work shows up first, but it's also where we get to do better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thembelihle. Can we give Thembi a round of applause? I think giving us a perspective there, Thembi, from your personal experience as well, in terms of wanting love that's what stood out for me. That's a part of being a person. It's a part of being human, but finding that real love and not conditional love is what is important. So looking at somebody, not because of their disability, but actually looking at them as a person, who they are, what they stand for. And love goes way deeper than sexual relations. It's a deep, intimate connection between a soulmate that shares a common understanding, that has a different personality to you, but you can complement each other. And I think that's an important aspect to understand as well. So thank you, Thembi. I really appreciate your presentation. All right, now we've got another speaker that's going to be presenting to us, and he is Dr. Danie Breedt. Dr. Breedt, he is a psychologist and managing director of Charis Psychological Services. Dr. Danie is also a columnist on our Rolling Inspiration magazine, and he's got more than 10 years experience in sexuality and psychological aspects. I see we've got a hand raised there from the audience. Could I ask that we keep our questions for the Q&A, if you don't mind, or you can type your question in the chat box there. But let's keep the questions for our designated Q&A time. Dr. Danie Breedt, I hand over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Chad. Let me just share my screen here quick. There we go. All right, sure. Thank you firstly for inviting me to this webinar. What a privilege to talk about something that is so central to human beings. And I'd like to share some of my thoughts on it. So thank you for having me. I maybe want to start with a little bit of a story. This might date me a little bit, but I feel like it fits well to the presentation. But as I grew up, there was a period where these dinosaur magazines came out with a lot of information and stuff. And then in the middle page, there was a page that had different colors and things that didn't really make sense. But with each issue came these glasses, with the one lens being red and the other one being green. And when you put these glasses on, this 3D picture sort of stepped out of the page, and and suddenly everything makes sense. So you something that didn't make sense before, as you put these glasses on, changes the picture completely. And I was always fascinated by how that worked and what was going on there. But the reason why I mentioned that is sort of the picture that I want to start off with, in that when I talk to sexuality, when I talk to people about sexuality and sex and intimacy and all of that, there's a certain lens that we look through, almost like these glasses that we put up. And I want to challenge those glasses today. I want us to, for the moment, put down the glasses we usually use and put on a different pair to look at sexuality from a different point of view, through like in a different way, in the same way that I looked at those dinosaur pictures when I was young, to maybe see a different part of sexuality that, and hopefully in a way that we haven't thought about it before. So the two glasses that I'm talking about, first is the glass of performance, the lens of performance, sex as performance. And then the one I want to recommend as an alternative, at least for today, or at least in consideration, is sexuality as communication. So what I mean with that, I want to unpack just first before we recommend an alternative. So very often we think of sexuality as performance. I think we think of it as something that I do, some function that I'm performing. It speaks to ability. What am I able to do? How well am I doing it? What is the technique like? Am I doing it well or not? Am I doing it right or wrong? And it inevitably brings the question of what works and what doesn't work. And when it comes to spinal cord injuries, this is often where the questions come from. It's this: now that I can't do this thing, now that there's a function that might be impaired, what is working, what is not working? And we take that all the way through to sexuality and sexual functioning, and then looking at it through that lens, the idea that sex is something that I need to perform in. And we tend to then compare, what was I like before, or what is somebody else like, and so on. So it becomes this competition, this comparison, when we look at sexuality through the lens of performance. And inevitably, we all fall short in some way. We usually tend to compare ourselves to something better. We never compare ourselves to something that we are actually good at, or something that we might be better at. We tend to compare ourselves to something or someone in a more desirable position, at least according to us. So today I want to recommend or suggest that we put on different glasses to look at sexuality, and that is seeing sexuality as communication. And what I mean with that is to say that sexuality and being sexually active in whatever form that takes, it's a form of self-expression. I'm communicating something to someone else. What is the meaning behind it? What is the meaning of this interaction? What is the connection like? So what kind of relationship is this? What are we sort of saying without words to each other as we engage in this intimacy dance? So the question when we put the glasses of communication as opposed to performance on is not what works or what doesn't work, but rather what am I expressing? What am I trying to communicate? So the reason why I want to challenge the notion of the lens of sexuality as performance is that it's limiting, and it's limiting on different levels. So the first one is that my body decides if I'm sexual or not. I love how Thembi also spoke about that, is that it almost becomes this thing that determines whether I'm sexual or not. And a disability does not mean asexuality. The desires are the same, the needs are the same, but it often feels like if I'm looking at it through a performance lens, it's almost like my body can decide whether I'm sexual or not. The second part that it plays a role in when we look at sexuality as performance is that I'm limited in expressing my desires. So my voice gets blunted, meaning that my body, sort of linking to the first one, if my body decides if I'm sexual and there's a difficulty physically, then it means my ability to voice my desires, to express what I'm feeling and express my needs and my preferences and everything surrounding sexuality is limited. And the third one is that sex becomes serious. It becomes a clinical and pressure activity. And I'm sure a lot of people would be able to relate that as soon as we put pressure on sexually performing, and when we think about how am I doing, and like if I had to rate this performance of mine, then usually we don't do too well. There's a correlation between the playful element of sexuality and how we express ourselves, a creative endeavor that we engage in when we look at sexuality in a different way. Whereas when it's performance, we tend to create the thing that we're trying to avoid. It becomes serious and not as enjoyable as we intended to be. So I want to maybe, from this other way of viewing it, I want to ask better questions. I want to maybe help you to think about it in a bit of a different way. If we look at this, if we look at sexuality through this lens, I want us to ask different questions. The first one, and it might be a bit of weird phrasing, but I've heard this once and I kind of liked how that it resonates with me. The first part is that if we look at relationships, if I see sexuality as communication, then I need to think about what it is that's going on inside of me. We do this without thinking all the time. Whenever we're communicating, there's something going on inside of me, and from that, I'm communicating. But very often we're so focused on the communication or the other person that we forget the me part, what is going on inside me, what is alive in me, what am I feeling, what am I thinking, what am I going through. When we're clear about that, it changes how we then communicate, what we then want to say, and so on. But the start is always with you. Just before we started the webinar, Chad made the comment about how important self-love and self-acceptance is. There's a whole journey before we even get to the sexuality with other people part of it. It's an introspective process of what is alive in me, what are my desires, what are the things that I'm thinking about, what is it that I'm trying to express. All of that starts with almost an inward glance. If we want to look at sexuality, love, connection, all of that, we need to start with being curious about what's going on inside of me, what is alive in me. The second part is, what am I communicating then to the other person? So if I'm feeling grateful towards somebody, I want to communicate connection to another, that is a form of communicating that comes through in sexuality. If I'm showing commitment, if I'm showing love, if I'm showing feeling safe, All of those are ways to communicate with another person that is not necessarily said in words. It's actually a wonderful ability that we have as humans to express ourselves in such a physical way, and it carries so much communication value, that we very often don't think of sexuality as a form of communication. So if you take a step back and you think of what is alive in me, what am I thinking about this person, about this relationship, what do I want to communicate? It becomes a different way of thinking about sexual encounters, intimacy, closeness, and relationships in general. And the last one is, instead of focusing on the physical barriers, which tends to be the case when I look at a, say, a spinal cord injury or a disability from the lens of performance, it's easy to see the barriers. It's easy to see the things that make it difficult, or I can't necessarily perform in the way that I want to perform. So it's so easy to focus on the barriers instead of saying, but the barriers is just one part of it. I rather want to focus on what am I trying to communicate to the other person. And if I can't do it in the way that I either did before or the way that I prefer, how can I still make sure that that message comes across in the way that I want it to? And if I can't do it in this way, is there another way to do it? So the focus immediately becomes it changes from a view of despondency and things not working and feeling helpless, to more of a focus of what can I do to get around this barrier. So it feels like a more proactive approach to say that the barriers don't define me. I define me. I have something that is alive in me that I want to communicate to another person, and I won't let the way that I maybe can't communicate it stop me from communicating it in a different way. So, sort of going on this, sorry, I'll just get to the next slide. In line with this, sexuality as being communication, you can also break this further down into a dialect. And if we had more time, I can spend all day chatting about what does the language of sexuality sound like. If sexuality is communication, what does that involve, and how many things can we unpack? And I think it becomes a very different way of viewing sexuality. But I want to focus on three things today, and maybe leave you with three ideas that if we can change. If we look at the same thing but from a different point of view, that it can maybe be a bit more mobilizing, instead of feeling like there's no hope and we don't know how to do. So the first dialect of sexuality, something that I want to challenge you to implement, is to look at sexuality as collaboration instead of evaluation. And what I mean with that is that sex, intimacy, everything related to relationships happen with two people. There's more than one person who contributes to this. When I evaluate my performance and so on, the focus is very much just on me. The spotlight is on me, the pressure is on me. It's a very solo endeavor. Even though there is another person there, it's almost like you forget that it's actually about the partnerships, about the togetherness. And I think when we look at sexuality with the glasses, to look at it rather as something that is communication. How can I communicate? Let's do this together. How can we look at it from a collaborative point of view? The second one is curiosity instead of pressure. It links to to Thembi's one slide at the end as well, which I think is such a beautiful suggestion, is to be curious about how can we do it differently. Maybe this is not the way I would have preferred to do it, or maybe it's different to what I did before. But is there another way? How does this work? What is different? What is not? So a non-judgmental stance towards sexuality, the stance of curiosity instead of pressure, saying things like I should or I shouldn't, or I actually have to have this before this. Actually, I think a stance of curiosity, both for you and your partner, is a much more empowering way of viewing sexuality. And finally, to try and focus on the connection instead of the comparison. I think with social media nowadays, we so easily get drawn into the trap of comparing our lives to other people. And as I mentioned earlier, we tend to always compare ourselves to people who are in some way better off than we are. They've got something we don't have, or they're able to do something we can't do. But we always look for those things instead of prioritizing connection, saying that sexuality and intimacy is an opportunity for connection. It's an opportunity for us to share something. And when we focus on the connection part of it, the comparison goes out the window. Then it becomes about how can we build this intimacy? How can we build this closeness? And I want to challenge you to maybe think about it a little bit differently and maybe see how it feels. Maybe these glasses work a bit better than the glasses of performance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dan. Let's give him a round of applause. Wow, I think in your presentation, a lot of insights in terms of you being a clinician. But I like the fact that you didn't make it too clinical. It was relatable, you know, and focusing on not what putting yourself under pressure, what I can do or what I can't do, but rather focusing on being curious in what and seeing it as such, and that avoids the pressure. But importantly, I think relationships must be firstly about having that connection, having that deep connection, and it's when two people come together, as I mentioned, it's two souls joining and becoming one and flowing and going through things together, trusting one another, trusting yourself. But importantly, I think introspection. What is it about me? What is it that I want? Do I understand my sexuality? Am I open to exploring it? And I think those questions is relevant in for all of us, Dr. Danie. And that leads me to opening up the floor to questions or comments. Please, the floor is yours to all the participants. Do you have a comment or question for the panel? I think there was a hand raised earlier. I think it was Thembelihle Ngcai. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Your hand was raised previously. Do you have a question, or was it covered in the presentations?
No, I'll withdraw my hand. Actually, I wanted to do a suggestion, but it's already late now.
Okay, no problem. Thanks. You can more than willing to type your suggestion in the comments if there's any for future webinars. Please, Thembelihle, you can share it in the chat box there. All right.
Okay. Just because you're giving me that platform, I would suggest if we're having speakers, two type of different speakers on different platform, like narratives. Can we first, because attending a meeting on Teams and attending a meeting live, it's totally different in terms of participation and concentration. On Teams, there are many distractions. Yeah, I'm still working on the system as I'm with you now. So please allow us. We get your first presenter, then we ask questions related to that presenter at that time, so that to keep us glued to your webinar at the same time. So I guess even some people had questions with Thembi, and some have got questions now with Doctor, but a little bit of confusion because we are on Teams. Just an advice.
Okay. No, thank you so much, Thembelihle. It's well taken. Yes, so for in future we can adjust the structure of the webinar so that attention is focused on the speaker, and then engagement, and then introduce the other speaker as well. Thank you. I see Zozo has a hand raised, or his hand raised. Hi, Zozo. Sorry, can you?
Hello.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, I was speaking, but I didn't realize that I hadn't unmuted myself. Good morning, well, afternoon, everybody. I have a question about this move. I'm that Dr. Danie was talking about, this sort of shifting of a sexual script, because I think in South Africa we we're in a culture that's almost very disempowered in terms of understanding the language of sexuality because of how incomprehensive the sexual education is in school, and by the first time you ever hear about sort of divergence in normative sexualities is like when you experience disability yourself or when you have a disabling event. So I guess my question was, what what do we do, not even just on a social level but also on a personal level? What does the work look like to change these sort of incomplete normative scripts that we inherit? Because I think also sexual skills, I love what you were talking about the dialect of sexuality, because we don't really understand sexuality as a language, and yet it is always communicating. And because it wasn't directly communicated to us through our caregivers and through systems and institutions, we don't even really know what the sexual scripts we're pulling from come from, and where we source the ideas of what a normative sexuality come from. And so I think about, like, what is the work of shifting what you think you know or what you've absorbed from your culture, from your surroundings that may be wrong or incomplete or whatever, to moving towards a curiosity? And how do we then also make that shift more of an equitable shift in partnership? Because as Thembelihle was talking about earlier, what tends to happen is that the disabled person becomes the educator and somehow has to become the subject matter expert, even as they're navigating the challenges and the barriers of their own bodies. So how do we invite partners and societies to kind of hold this changing, this curiosity, this change of a sexuality that is based in communication rather than a performance? I'd like to hear from both of you, actually.
Do you want to go first, Tembi? Are you happy for me to take a whack at it?
No, please. I'd like the expert to go first, and then I'll come in. Great question. Thanks.
Yeah, I firstly just want to acknowledge the what you're saying, Zozo. It is there's a reality to what we've inherited generationally, culturally. I mean, there is a story behind sexuality that we are living out now. We are the recipients of a certain narrative and so on. So I want to acknowledge that it is, in general, it's already a topic that needs to be navigated, and how do we do it and all of that. And then when you add disabilities and rights and all of that on top of it, it just makes it more complicated. And I like the fact that you split it into social and individual, because I think that's exactly where my head went, is that we need social change and social reform. We need to change narratives on a social level about sexuality, opening up conversations and asking those questions, almost like the says who kind of questions, that we are forced to that we're forced into, and never being even challenging it because you didn't know anything else, so you took it as reality, truth. So I think on a social level, it takes work and it takes time, and I think there's a lot of places that we can make our voices heard on a social level, but it's varying, and it takes time. When you change something on that bigger scale, people don't change easily, or big community societies and so on. It does take time. So we almost, there's a part of it that unfortunately does take patience, but it doesn't happen by itself. So I do think there's a proactiveness needed in it to have these conversations. So yeah, very vague on a social level, but I think it's important to mention that ultimately what we're looking for is social change in terms of the narratives of sexuality. But I do think it starts on an individual level. You know, it's easy to feel despondent and say, I can't change the social level of it. There's so much, and how am I ever going to make a dent for me personally? But I do think it's social is a combination of a lot of individuals. So I think an easy place to start if somebody's feeling lost and is just to say that, what can I do in my situation? Can I look at sexuality differently? Can I talk about it differently? Can I, through the way that I engage in my relationships, how I talk about it, the conversations I become part of, I can I change it a little bit by little bit? Because I think something that comes with force, and it's you have to change, and it's people has the opposite reaction to it. But when we do it in a curious way, in an interested way, just sharing your experience, sharing how you think about it, have you considered this, that kind of approach, I think has a much higher likelihood of almost becoming a wave that changes socially. But it begins with it's small beginnings that lead to that.
Thank you for the question. I actually, when I first wrote my, the first essay that I wrote about love, dating, and relationships spoke a lot about the politics of desirability. And I think that's the only way, for me, I can answer the question because again, like I said in the slide, attraction is not neutral. And although I didn't go into depth about who exactly shapes it and creates it and who sustains it for what, it is shaped a lot by media, the exposure that we said. I love what you said about sexual education, particularly when we think about how they even when I think about the sexual education I received in schools, it was all heteronormative, heteronormative, like aligned, and spoke about, sexual relationships between men and female. Fear, familiarity, and power. And I think a lot of it is still about how persons with disabilities are perceived, the fragility, the care, the dependence. So I think for me, one of the key components is how do we have a conversation where we teach people to interrogate preferences, and what informs preferences, without shaming them, but just from a place of honesty, particularly because those preferences are shaped, I think Dr. Danie said this, by social hierarchies as well. So so I think for me it's I think it would be another webinar topic about who gets to define desire, and whose imagination has been narrowed by social training. So I think for me that's how I would just respond to that. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Danie and Thembi. I trust Zozo's question was answered. I see we've got another hand raised here by Bongani Mapumulo. Bongani, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, and thanks a lot, Chadley. And just before I proceed, I just want to just put it to you that I'm a big fan of the two speakers that you have brought here today. So perhaps I would like to get maybe authority to engage them both, because I think they have their own very unique and very special ways of framing concepts and arguments. So perhaps I'll start with Thembelihle. I'm a huge fan of her work, and it just gets me thinking in so many different kinds of ways. So maybe I do have a little bit of a privilege that I've engaged with the majority of your writing. So for purposes of perhaps my question, maybe let me try to frame it this way. I'll actually quote something that you wrote. It's the trap of the exceptional disabled woman. The public has a preference for disabled women who are admirable visually striking, expressive, brave, but not disruptive. We are expected to perform disability in a way that is emotionally legible to others. We are celebrated when we inspire and dismissed when we demand. As I think any kind of like disabled body that tries to veer into spaces where people that have disabilities do not feature a lot, this happens very often. In my journey, I would say majority of it, because my background is mainly in academia, I experienced this quite a bit. And perhaps what might be different is perhaps as a man who has a masculine sort of like experience, it might be a little bit different because perhaps I might have developed some strength and perhaps some authority that comes with sort of like the expectation of masculinity. Yeah, but this is it's a forum or it's a platform on relationships. So I think my question would rather go into this, how you frame this, because it's quite mainstream, but in an intimate space, how perhaps have you made an effort to try and make sense of it for yourself and perhaps for your partner? You can, feel free to go into it philosophically. You can also go into it by virtue of experience, maybe past, and perhaps what you would like to see in the future. And for Dr. Danie, thank you once more as well. You have helped me sort of like also try and find ways to make sense of my own experience within sort of like the disability and sexuality. Perhaps I'll share something a little bit personal. I remember there was a time I left KZN to go into the Western Cape. I was relatively older, so I would say I was quite in touch with what I'm about, sort of like sexually, what my identity is about, what makeup is mainly sort of broken down into. However, culturally, it's almost like I felt like a fish out of water. I just could not fit in. I it's not like I was doubting myself whether I'm attractive or not, but it's almost like I was having just major questions about what do women within this space want, or what are they about? You know what I mean? And perhaps my own question marks around like, how does a man come across started really, really sort of like triggering my mind. And that intersected with an experience which made a huge difference for me. Some academics within the university, which is Stellenbosch at the time, were delving a lot into questions about disability and sexuality. And I remember getting an opportunity to write a chapter on it. And I went into a whole variety of places and sources to try and make sense of how do I come across, for instance, those questions, what is alive in me? What am I communicating to the other person? How can I communicate it despite the physical barriers? I hope that makes more sense now why your questions were so important. So for those that are interested, I'd be happy to put more information about it in the chat. The book was Disability and Sexuality Stories from South Africa. So yeah, I really, really had a lot of fun around it, but yeah, it was really, really challenging because when one has to go into the past to try and understand what makes you who you are, what makes you a sexual being, what makes your masculinity, what it is, is it culturally? I went into, places like entertainment, music, movies, why am I the way that I am? So yeah, I know I started with Thembelihle and then I went into Dr. Danie, but whichever of you two can answer. thank you again, Chadley, for indulging me on this. I'm very, very passionate about this subject, as you can tell. So yeah, thank you so much for this platform.
First. I'm so happy to see you on the webinar. Sometimes with webinars, you don't know who's going to join. And I did see a whole lot of people that I know, and I thought I'm so interested if they're going to join, because some of these questions they ask personally one-on-one. And I think there's certain questions that they can't ask the person at risk of offending you. I think to answer your, I hope I'm going to answer it correctly. It's always interesting to be quoted on something you wrote, because you have to remember what was I thinking at the time that I was
Exactly,
writing
yeah.
it. Yeah. So I think I've always been rewarded, or my experience is that women with disabilities are more rewarded for their closeness to non-disabled women in terms of success, in terms of beauty, anything that, how can I put this? Anything that brings them closer to normalcy or non-disabled women, greatly rewarded. And one of those women where I benefit a lot from people saying I don't look disabled, right? But I want to say that there's a lot of sacrifice you have to make, not sacrifice, but I think being disruptive or outspoken about disability and relationships, it definitely puts I hope I'm answering you wrong, and I feel like we need to have a conversation about this aside, so that I can see what we're engaging with. But I think I know people are particularly scared of me because of my opinions, and I think particularly when you spoke open about disability in the way that I am, people are afraid to broach you because I think I've said this before. They think you're an activist also in romantic relationships. So they feel like there's no open or they feel like they don't want to do anything wrong. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I want to have more time to think about it, or if you can write it for me, because there's so many things that are going through my head. But let's pin it at that, because I'm trying to think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just say that part that you quoted was so beautiful. I've got so much respect in somebody who knows how to use words. That's just like poetic. Just wanted to mention that.
She's really good at it. She is.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Sure. No, it's a real gift.
Yeah.
Bongani, I can hear the transition was tough, and it led you to have a lot of questions, and I've got an opinion on that and that experience. But I just want to check what the question is, that I don't go off on a tangent of something that I'm thinking and I missed the question completely. So can you just clarify what you'd like me to answer specifically?
I think perhaps it was just a way of just relating it to when one has tried or endeavored to try to find their own answers within themselves. It tends to make it slightly easier to relate to others sexually, if I may put it, right? Because I think, and by the way, it can be a very, very scary thing to do as well, because you don't know what answers you might find. However, I think if you have tried, you become a little bit less insecure when you aren't necessarily well received, because you have sort of like tried to find your own answers. So it just helps one feel less, insecure about, I'm not a heteronormative body, so to speak. And it's almost like you build your own sort of like thick skin, and it's a lot easier to deal with rejection, for instance. from a woman when you know that, okay, perhaps to get to the one that does like me, I might have to talk to a little bit, to a few. But along the way, I'm probably gonna get a lot more confident with what I do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think like it's so like part of our DNA to want to belong as part of a group. So we're sort of asking, like I think of what you mentioned as two parts. On the one side, my need to belong. So who's my tribe? Who's my people?
Yeah.
Who feels the same way, sees the things the same way as I do. So there's that need, and then there's also a need to understand another group. So if I move somewhere and I'm exposed to a different culture, different whatever, I'm trying to make sense of what's going on there. And on the one side, we have the tendency to want to think in categories. So we want to say that that group is like this, so because if I can have people fit into that box, I can have some sort of grip on what's going on over there, because something is different, but I'm not sure what it is. So there's a tendency that we have to group people together for our own sanity, I guess, and to then ask the question of whether I fit in there or not. And I think when although it's helpful to think of other groups and seeing differences and similarities and so on, I think where the solution lies is in a one-on-one. So even if I have a conversation and a whatever with one person from that group, you realize the individual differences. So there are certain things that person has that fits into that group, but the more you talk to individuals, the more you realize that we're all so different as well, which doesn't solve what category do you fall into, but I find it more helpful to answer the question of, are we compatible, meaning you and me, not this group and that group. And so I guess the short answer that I always encourage is, as long as we keep on talking, as long as we don't assume and we don't just stick to the categories in that group and this group, as long as we keep on talking, and specifically individuals talking, then we're making progress. As long as we're willing to engage in that, there's progress to be made. And that process is always a bit uncomfortable, a bit, we bump each other. But as long as we are willing to continue with that, I think the progress can be made.
Thank you, Doc.
Oh, I see. We've just gone over time, but Dr. Danie and Thembi, do you have room for one more question from Zintle?
Yes, my
Perfect.
fave. Of course you can ask.
Okay. Zintle, the floor is yours, my dear.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was excellent. I just wanted to suggest something, if it's possible. If it's not possible, that's also okay. When we're talking, we're always talking about things from our side, how our experience and how we think we are perceived. I was wondering if it's possible for the next webinar we have on this topic, because clearly that an hour is just not enough. Could we try to engage with someone? I'm not sure if everyone here is disabled or not, but just to get an opinion from the other side. The doctor was saying that we must ask ourselves the questions, what am I communicating? We may not know what we are communicating, through different ways, body language and all those things. I'd just like to hear from the able people side, how we can perhaps do better. And also, Thembelihle, there was the last line she had was that about intimacy. What was that line, Temi, about intimacy?
Just a sec. I'm trying to find it.
He said intimacy is where society's unfinished work shows up.
Yeah.
And then there was something about us. It was the very last line on your presentation.
It's also where we get to do better.
Yes, so I think I would just like to suggest, or just maybe, I don't know, but some kind of collaboration, because this thing is it's a two-way thing. Because when you're talking about dating, and I just like to know, how, even how we can collaborate that intimacy. I don't know if I'm out of line or what, but I just like to get something from the other side, as to how do we communicate better, and how do we collaborate the partnership or the intimacy, going
Mm.
forward.
No, thank you. Valid points, Zintle. And if the panelists don't mind if I step in here. Yes, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. Because as members, we do have couples where one is a person who doesn't have a disability and the other is a person with disability. And I can think of a few that have been married for more than 25 years, certainly more than 25 years, the other one. And I think for the next webinar, maybe to get them on board as we build on, because clearly this topic has sparked the desire for a series perhaps to unfold from this. And I think having that perspective from the one partner who isn't a person with disability, and how that dynamic plays out and how that communication plays out. But I must say the two gentlemen that I know that are married for a long time, and being the people with disabilities, I think they are quite charming. They have excellent communication skills. They have studied their partner so well. They know what makes their partner tick. They know what excites their partner. They know, they are, yeah, extremely through experience, come to that point where the relationship has flourished, because of understanding the dynamic, also. But yes, that's a great point, Zintle, getting, as we continue a series, getting a perspective also from those who are in relationships, uh, as I'm assuming, with someone who does not have a disability. I hope I answered your questions, Zintle. Faith, I
Yes,
think we've got
thanks.
one or 2 minutes. I know we've got the doctor probably has a busy schedule, and Tembi, but Faith, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. Am I
Hi,
audible
Faith.
enough?
Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Oh, okay. What I would like to say, I would like to add, because I did have the conversation with Tembi on WhatsApp. So I just want to add on what my experience has been, because I've never dated a disabled guy, as I am disabled. So even my dad had a disability, and he also never dated a disabled lady. He only dated able-bodied ladies. So from what I've learned and from my experience, I think we have a connection, and communicating, because sometimes people are shy. Or like, let's say it's the first time in a relationship, and then we are with that guy who's normal, who doesn't have a disability. So you are shy to take off your clothes and stuff. But if that person is at ease around you, he helps you to be free. You understand? You communicate with, me, I'm like this, I like this. Because my problem, my disability, I'm paraplegic, I have osteogenesis type C. So my legs are stiff going down. They don't, I can't open them wide. You understand? So when I meet with the guys, then now I have to explain what, guys, I can't open my legs like 360 and stuff. So most of the guys will be like shying away from those kind of things, you understand? Would now, oh, which means if I touch you here, I'm gonna break you, or if I do this, I'm gonna do that. Then I was like, no, relax. You understand? I'm the one I was teaching him about me. So I'll be like, no, relax. So the partner that I have, my husband now, we've got two kids. He he just said, no, let's learn each other. Let's teach each other things that we don't know about intimacy, right? So we now are at a stage where we just communicate, and it comes normally. If I'm not satisfied, I always tell him, bruh, today you didn't hit the right spot. He also does the same. You understand? So I think it takes for us to communicate better, get to know each other better before you do the deed. You understand? So that was my take. Even when I was speaking to Timber, like first guys would run. You know, they'll be shy to come to your room, come visit you. They come at night, they leave early in the morning before anyone sees them. Then I decided to put a stop to all that. Like, if someone loves you, they'll have to love you for who you are, wheelchair or no wheelchair, or if you're using crutches, or if you have an amputated leg. He has to see all of that. He has to be part of all of that. So if he can't access all of that, then it's not for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faith. I don't know if I can, if I'm the right person to give feedback on that, but that makes sense. Yeah, communicating clearly what your needs are and what the needs of. I'm by no means an expert in relationships. There's times when I had to, when I almost ended up sleeping outside because of poor communication with my wife. But I get you. You know, poor a good understanding, communicating, asking those questions when there's uncomfortableness and when there's not. How can we improve? And that's a relationship. No, it builds, it grows, it becomes and expands. But it's all about putting in that work, right? And it's not going to move forward if you as a couple don't commit to putting in that work. Um, yes, I totally agree. Yeah, I see, guys, we are 15 minutes over time. And I want to ask or propose this. If anybody else has more questions and you don't want to ask them on this platform, please, you can send me an email, right, with your question. And I'm sure if the panelists can acknowledge with a head nod if I can forward those questions, and they would then respond and take the time to respond to you. You guys all have my email address. I've invited you. So if you have questions, please don't be afraid um, to send them my way so that I can forward it to our two speakers. And, with that being said, and as we wrap up today's conversation, I want to take a moment to appreciate the honesty, vulnerability, and wisdom that both our speakers and you guys on the floor have opened up and shared with us. So we've looked at and we've just touched the surface about love, relationships, and sexuality. And there's, of course, a lot of layers involved in dating, especially, when it comes to a person with a disability and having those questions, and the general public being still ignorant and having their stigmas. But it is our part. We play a huge part in addressing those, and not being afraid to speak up about sexuality within the disability space. And as such, I want to thank the speakers from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Dr. Danie. Thank you, Thembi. You've provided us with clarity. You were excellent in terms of your delivery. And most importantly, I want to thank everyone else who joined and listened to this webinar. And I trust that today's discussion will inspire more openness and more understanding and more and provided that platform where you as members of QASA could also share your experiences, which you have done. And lastly, as I conclude, self-love is the best kind of love, because knowing yourself and loving yourself is important, because you are unique. There's nobody else like you in the world. And if you can ask those questions and not be shy to discover who you are, it will give you that confidence to put yourself out there and connect with others, socialize with others. And who knows, maybe Cupid comes and shoots his arrow when you find yourself out there, putting yourself out there, and finding that special person. And if you are in a relationship, maybe this has given you insight on how on what to look for and what to look out for in your relationship, and how to perhaps improve on your intimacy and sexuality as you move forward in your relationship. I would love to sing a love song to officially conclude, but I'll leave that for another platform. Thank you very much, guys. It was super awesome having you, and stay awesome, stay cool, and all the best with your love life going forward. Take care and bye-bye.
Thanks, Chad. Take care.
You're welcome, guys.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, eh?
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.